I guess a couple people were in luck. A couple weeks ago, somebody asked me to do a video on Greek mythology for the Sirens. So whoever, the person that requested it, you're in luck. Um, so so in Greek mythology, sirens were female human-like beings with lurid voices, and they appear in scene in the Odyssey in which Odysseus saves his crew's lives. That's also in Homer's Odyssey, basically, that was mentioned. Um, Roman poets placed them on some small islands called the Sirenum Scopoli. Um, and some later rationalized traditions, the literal geography of the flowery island of Anathomosa or Anthomusa um, is fixed, sometimes on Cape Pelorum, and others in the islands known as the Sirenes near Paestum or in Capri. All such locations were surrounded by cliffs and rocks, which is where they're normally found at. Um, and here's a picture of what a statue of a siren, an antique funerary statue of a siren playing on a tortoiseshell lyre, and that was centered around 370 BC. Um, Here's an archaic perfume base in the shape of a siren around 540 BC. Now, sirens continue to be used as a symbol of the dangerous temptation embodied by a woman regularly throughout the Christian arts of the medieval era. Now sirens can be used as a slang term for a woman considered to be both very attractive and very dangerous. Um, the etymology of the name is contested. Um, Robert Beeks had suggested a pre-Greek origin for the name. Others had connected the name to rope or cord, and also eru, to tie, join, or fasten, resulting in the meaning binder or entangler. Um, Now, one who will bind or entangle through the magic song. Now, this can be connected to the famous scene of Odysseus being bound to the mast of his ship, and to resist their song. Um, Now, sirens were later often used as a synonym for mermaids, and portrayed with upper human bodies and fishtails. Now, this combination became iconic in the medieval period. Um, Now, the circumstances leading to the commonling involved the treatment of sirens in the medieval psychologists and bestiaries, both iconographically. Now, as well as textually in translations from Latin to Vulgar language, as described below. Now, when it came to the sirens of Greek mythology first appeared in Homer's Odyssey, where Homer did not provide any physical description of what they looked like, and their visual appearance was left to the reader's imagination. Um, but when the 7th century came about, sirens were regularly depicted in art as human-headed birds. Apollonius of Rhodes and Argonautica, the 3rd century BC, described the sirens in writing as part woman and part bird. They may have been influenced by the bow-bird of Egyptian religion. In early Greek art, the sirens were generally represented as large birds with women's heads. Um, Bird feathers and scaly feet. Later depictions shifted to show sirens with human upper bodies and bird legs, with or without wings, and they were shown playing a variety of musical instruments, especially the lyre, the kithara, or oboes. Um, and here's a picture of another statue of a siren, and this one's called a moaning siren. Like, I don't know. And this was from Myrna, from Myrina, 1st century BC. And you're gonna hear some of the rainstorm probably in the background. It's thundering outside where I live at. Um, the 10th century Byzantine dictionary Suda stated that sirens, which is ancient Greek, had the form of sparrows from their chests up, and below there were women, or that they were little birds with women's faces. Um, Originally, sirens were shown that they could be either male or female, but the male sirens disappeared from art around the 5th century BC, and most people portrayed the sirens as basically women. Um, some surviving classical period examples had already depicted the siren as a mermaid-like. Um, Now, the sirens are described as mermaids or tritonesses, an example dating to the 3rd century BC, included an earthenware bowl found in Athens and a terracotta oil lamp possibly from the Roman period. Um, the first known literary attestation of a siren as a mermaid appeared in the Anglo-Latin catalog Liber Monstrum, early 8th century AD, where it says that sirens were sea girls with the body of a maiden but have scaly fishtails. Um, now here's a picture of a miniature. Here's a miniature illustration of a siren enticing sailors who tried to resist her from an English vestry around 1235. Um, Now, the siren appeared in several illustrated manuscripts of the Physiologus and its successors called the Bestiaries. The siren was depicted as a half woman and a half fish mermaid in the 9th century Bernie Physiologus. So, as an early example, but continued to be illustrated with both bird-like parts, wings, clawed feet, and fish-like tail. Um, Now, in classical literature, when it comes to the family tree of these, although Sophocles' fragment makes Phosphorus their father, when sirens are named, they are usually as daughters of the river god Aeschylus, either by the muse Terrascopor, Melpomene, or Calliope, or lastly by Sterope, daughter of the king Porphyron of Calydon. Not sure if I'm saying any of those right. Um, In Euripides' play Helen, Helen in her anguish calls upon winged maidens, daughters of the earth, Chiron. Um, Although they lured mariners, the Greeks portrayed the sirens in their meadows starred with flowers and not as sea deities. Epimenides claimed that the sirens were children of Oceanus and Ga. Sirens are found in many Greek stories, notably mostly in Homer's Odyssey. Um, Now, when it comes to the list of sirens, their number is variously reported as from 2 to 8 in the Odyssey. Homer says nothing of their origin or names, but he gives the number of the sirens as 2. But later writers mention both their names and number. Some state that there were 3, like Pesinoi, Algalope, and Philexiampia. Like I said, or Agoloni, Aglo, and Thelzopia, Parthenope, Lygia, and Leucosia. Apollonius followed Hesiod, and he gives their names as Thelonoi, Molpi, and Agolophonus. Now the Suda gives their names as Thelzopia, Pesinoi, and Lygia. Hyginus gives the number of the sirens as 4. Tellus, Radni, Molpi, and Thelziope. Eusebius states that there were only 2, Agolophelmi and Thelzopia. An ancient base painting assesses the 2 names as Himerope and Thelzopia, and their names are variously rendered in the later sources as Thelzopia, Thelziope, Thelzonoi, Molpi, Himerope, Agolophonus, Agolope, Agolophemi, Pesinoi, and Pezanoi, Pesathoi, Parathenope, Lugia, Lycosia, Radmi, and Tellus. Now, according to Ovid, the Sirens were the companions of young Persephone. Demeter gave them wings to search for Persephone when she was abducted by Hades. However, the fabulae of Hyginus has Demeter cursing the Sirens for failing to intervene in the abduction of Persephone. Now, according to Hyginus, Sirens were fated to live only until the mortals who heard their Demeter is cursing the Sirens for failing to intervene in the abduction of Persephone. According to Hyginus, Sirens were fated to live only until the mortals who heard their songs could pass by them. Now, here's a siren of Canossa. This is a silhouette exposing psychopomp characteristics in the late 4th century BC. Now, the Muses were big too back then. In the sanctuary of Hera in Coronea, there was a statue created by Pythodorus of Thebes, depicting Hera holding the Sirens. According to the myth, Hera persuaded the Sirens to challenge the Muses to a singing contest. After the Muses won, they are said to have plucked the Sirens' feathers and used them to make crowns for themselves. Now, according to Stephanus of Byzantium, the Sirens, overwhelmed by their loss, cast off their feathers from their shoulders, turned white, and then threw themselves into the sea. As a result, the nearby city was called Aptera, which means featherless, and the nearby islands were called the Lucai, meaning the white ones. John Zetus recounts that after defeating the Sirens, the Muses crowned themselves with the Sirens' wings, except for Terpsichore, who was their mother, adding that the city of Aptera, named after this event, furthermore, is one of the letters ruling the empire mentions the Muses' victory over the Sirens. In Argonautica, Jason had been warned by Chiron that Orpheus would be necessary in his journey to where he had to go. When Orpheus heard their voices, he drew out his lyre and he played his music more beautifully than they did, drowning out their voices. And one of the crew, however, the sharp-eared hero Bootis, heard the song and leapt into the sea, but he was caught up and carried safely away by the goddess Aphrodite. When it comes to Odysseus' Odyssey, Odysseus was curious as to what the Sirens sang to him, and so in the Vice of Circe, he had all of his sailors plug their ears with beeswax and tie him to the mast. He ordered his men to leave him tied tightly to the mast, no matter how much he might beg. Now, when he heard their beautiful song, he ordered the sailors to untie him, but they bound him tighter. And when they had passed out of earshot, Odysseus demonstrated with his frowns to be released. Some post-Homeric authors state that the Sirens were fated to die if someone heard their singing and escaped them, and that after Odysseus passed by them, therefore they flung themselves into the water and they would perish. Now here's a vase painting of Odysseus and the Sirens. Pliny the 1st century Roman historian Pliny the Elder discounted Sirens as a pure fable, although Dion, or whatever, the father of Clercus, a celebrated writer, asserts that they exist in India and that they charm men by their song, and having first lured them to sleep, they would tear them into pieces. Now, the statue of the Sirens in a funerary context are attested since the classical era in mainland Greece as well as Asia Minor and Magna Graecia. The so-called Siren of Canossa, the Canossa de Puglia, is a site in Apulia that was part of Magna Graecia, and it was said to accompany the dead among grave goods and burial. She appeared to have some psychopomp characteristics, guiding the dead on the afterlife journey. The last terracotta figure bears traces of its original white pigment. The woman bears the feet, wings, and tail of a bird. The sculpture is conserved in the National Archaeological Museum in Spain and Madrid. The Sirens were called the Muses of the Lower World. Classical scholar Walter Copeland Perry observed that their song, although irresistibly sweet, was no less sad than sweet, and lapped both body and soul in a fatal lethargy, the forerunner of death and corruption. Their song is continually calling on Persephone. Now, the term siren refers the term siren song refers to an appeal that is hard to resist, but that, if heeded, will lead to a bad conclusion. Later writers have implied that the sirens ate humans based on Circe's depiction of them lolling there in their metal, around them heaps of corpses rotting away, and rags of skin shriveling on their bones. Now here's another picture of Odysseus and the Sirens. And this is a Roman mosaic painting, 2nd century A.D. And this is housed at the Bardo National Museum. Now, as linguist Jane Ellen Harrison had noted of the cur as a siren, it is strange and beautiful that Homer should make the sirens appeal to the spirit, but not the flesh. The siren song is a promise to Odysseus of romantic truce, with a false promise that he will live to tell them that, and they sing, once he hears to his heart's content, sails on, a wiser man. We know all the pains that the Greeks and Trojans once endured on the spreading plain of Troy when the gods willed it so. All that comes to pass on the fertile earth, we know it all. Now, the Sirens are romantic creatures, just like the Sphinx, with whom they have much in common with, knowing both the past and the future. Jane Ellen Harrison had mentioned. Their song takes effect at midday in a windless calm. The end of that song is death, but that the sailor's flesh is rotting away suggests that it has not been eaten yet. But it has been suggested that with their feathers stolen, their divine nature kept them alive, but unable to provide food for their visitors, they ended up starving to death by refusing to leave. Now, if you read the Bible, according to the ancient Hebrew book of Enoch, the women who were led astray by the fallen angels will be turned into sirens. Late antiquity, by the 4th century, when pagan beliefs were overtaken by Christianity, the belief in literal sirens was discouraged. Saint Jerome, who produced the Latin Vulgate version of the Bible, used the word sirens to translate Hebrew Tannim, meaning jackals, in the book of Isaiah 13:22, and also to translate a word for owls in the book of Jeremiah 50:39. Now, the siren is allegorically described as a beautiful courtesan or prostitute who sings pleasant melodies to men, and is the symbolic vice of pleasure in the preaching of Clement of Alexandria in the 2nd century. Later writers such as Ambrose, 4th century, reiterated the notion that the siren stood as a symbol of allegory for worldly temptations, and that's an endorsement of the Greek myth. The early Christian humorous interpretation of mythologized human beings, they received a long-lasting boost from the etymology by Isidore of Seville. The Greeks, imagined that there were 3 sirens, part virgins, part birds with wings and claws. Now, one of them sang, another played the flute, and the third the lyre. They drew sailors, decoyed by song, to shipwreck. According to the truth, however, there were prostitutes who led travelers down to poverty and were said to impose shipwreck on them, and they had wings and claws because love flies and wounds They are said to have stayed in the waves because a wave created Venus. Um, Now, in allegorical texts, um, the Siren and the Anno Center, which are two hybrid creatures, appear as the subject of a single chapter in the Physiologus, as they appear together in the Septuagint, translation of the aforementioned Isaiah 13:21 and 22 and 34:14. They also appear together in some Latin bestiaries of the first family subgroup called B. Isidorus. Um, Now, the miniatures, the Siren's bird-like description from classical sources, um, also retained the Latin version of the Physiologus in the 6th century, and several subsequent bestiaries in the 13th century. But at some time during the interim, the mermaid shape was introduced to this body of work, as you can see that here. On the right is on the left is a Siren BNF Latin, and then on the right is a Siren bestiary bound in a theological miscellany. Now, the Siren was illustrated as a woman fish mermaid, and the Bern Physiologus dated to the mid 9th century. Even though this contradicted the accompanying text, which described it as avian, an English-made Latin bestiary dated between the years of 1220 and 1250 also depicted a group of sirens as mermaids with fishtails swimming in the sea. Even though the text stated that they resembled winged fowl down to their feet. Now, illustrating the Siren as a pure mermaid became commonplace in the second family bestiaries, and she was shown holding the musical instrument in the classical tradition, but also sometimes holding apparently an eelfish. For example, the Siren mermaid holding such a fish was found in one of the earlier codices in this group, which dated back to the 12th century. You can see another workshop bestiary here of 3 different sirens. And then down here is another bestiary of sirens. A counterexample is also given where the illustrated sirens group of 3 are bird-like, conforming to the text. The siren was sometimes drawn as a hybrid with a human torso, a fish-like lower body, and bird-like wings and feet. While in the Harley 3244, top right, the wings sprout from around the shoulders, and other hybrid types. The style places the siren's wings hanging at the waist. Now, also, a siren may be holding a comb or a mirror. Now, thus, the comb and mirror, which are now emblematic of mermaids across Europe, they derive from the bestiaries that describe the siren as a main creature requiring those accoutrements. Now, later bestiary texts appeared which were modified to accommodate the artistic conventions. It explained that the siren's other part may be like fish or like bird. They would also appear several times in medieval works that conflated the sirens with mermaids while citing Physiologus as their source. An Italian poet named Dante depicts a siren in Canto 19 of Purgatorio, which is like purgatory, the second canticle of the Divine Comedy. We are talking about a Greek mythology character called the Siren. Now here, the pilgrim dreams of a female who is described as stuttering, cross-eyed, and crooked on her feet, with stunted hands and pallid in color. It is not until the pilgrim gazes upon her that she is turned desirable and is revealed by herself to be a siren. Um, this siren then claims that she turned Ulysses from his course, um, and desirous of my song, and whoever becomes used to me rarely leaves me. So wholly do I satisfy him. Given that Dante did not have access to the Odyssey, the sirens claim that she turned Ulysses from his course is inherently false because the sirens in the Odyssey did not manage to turn Ulysses from his path. Um, Now Ulysses and his men were warned by Circe and prepared for their encounter by stuffing their ears full of wax, except for Ulysses. I don't do math stuff. Um, except now Ulysses, who wishes to be bound to the ship's mast because he wants to hear the siren song, scholars claim that Dante, um, because Ulysses wants to hear the siren song. So scholars claim that Dante may have misinterpreted the siren's claim from an episode in Cicero's De Finibus. The pilgrim's dream comes to an end when a lady, holy and quick, who had not yet been present before, suddenly appears and says, "Oh, Virgil, who is this?" Virgil, who's the pilgrim's guide, then steps forward and tears the clothes from the siren's belly, which awakened me, the pilgrim, with the stench that issued from it. This marks the ending of the encounter between the pilgrim and any siren. Um, Now, in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae, Brutus of Troy encounters sirens at the Pillars of Hercules on his way to Britain to fulfill a prophecy that he will establish an empire there. Um, the sirens the sirens surrounded and nearly overtook the ships, and Brutus escapes to the sea, Tyrrhenian. Now, by the time the Renaissance period came, by the time of the Renaissance period, female court musicians known as courtesans filled the role of an unmarried companion, and musical performances by unmarried women could be seen as immoral. Now, seen as a creature who could control a man's reason, female singers became associated with the mythological figure of the siren, who usually took a half human, half animal form somewhere on the cusp between nature and culture. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, the painter, wrote of them in his notebook, stating, "The siren sings so sweetly that she lulls the mariners to sleep. Then she climbs upon the ships and kills the sleeping mariners." Um, um, Now, however, in the 17th century, some Jesuit writer began to assert their actual existence, including Cornelius Lapide, who said of the siren, "Her glance is that of the fabled basilisk." Now, if you've seen Harry Potter, there's a snake called a basilisk. It was mentioned in the second movie that if you stared into the basilisk's eyes, you would suffer instant death. Um, Now, the siren, her voice, which is a siren's voice, with her voice, she recants, "With her beauty, she deprives of reason. Voice and sight alike deal destruction and death." And Antonio de Loria also argued for their existence, and Athenaeus Kircher argued that compartments must have been built for them aboard Noah's Ark, which I have not seen. Some guy claimed he found Noah's Ark. I don't believe he did. That was just a lie to basically to try to put out support for that. Um, Now, Charles Burney expounded around 1789 in A General History of Music. The name, according to Bocart, also derives from the Phoenician and implies a songstress. Hence, this is probable that in ancient times there may have been excellent singers, but of corrupt morals, on the coast of Sicily, who by seducing voyagers gave rise to this fable. Um, Now, in the classical dictionary, around 1827, it wrote, Some suppose that the Sirens were several less vicious women in Sicily who prostituted themselves to strangers and made them forget their pursuits while drowned in unlawful pleasures. The etymology of Bocart also deduces the name from a Phoenician term denoting a songstress, and it favors the explanation given of the fable um, by the word dam, damm. This distinguished critic makes the Sirens to have been excellent singers and divesting the fables, respecting them of all of their terrific features, and he supposes that by the charms of music and song they detained travelers and made them altogether forgetful of their native land. Um, okay, so everybody has their own theory as to what a siren looks like. Okay, you can picture a siren to look exactly as you would want them to be. So like in the book Homer's The Odyssey, he never gave a description, so it was the reader's imagination to picture what a siren could look like. So that is the end of the Sirens for that portion. Let's close this out. Okay. So next week, I will give up. I will put up a few videos here. I will put up. I'll suggest some stuff for videos for next week when I get the time to put them out. So next week we have Sasanian Empire, the myth of Santa Claus. This is a Achaemenid Empire. Then we have let's close that one out. Okay, so yeah, so we got Sasanian Empire, Santa Claus, and the Achaemenid Empire, and then the Persian. I think there was the Persian Empire too. Yeah, the Persian Empire was also known as the Achaemenid Empire, so they were kind of the same thing. Okay, so yeah, either one would go. So let me know what videos you want me to do for next week. Like I said, we got Sasanian Empire, Santa Claus, the mythical being, the Achaemenid Empire or Persian Empire, and those will be my videos to talk about next week. I'm gonna have to research more Greek characters too, and see if I can get to all of them. And like I said, there is a lot of them, because when it comes to Greek mythology, you got female gods, like female goddesses, and male gods, and there's like a lot of them. So we'll get to those. So let me know what you thought about this, about the Sirens here. And also if you follow my channel, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more videos like this. And I've been doing a lot more live streams to get to know my fan base. So make sure to hit the like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll get back to you guys next week.